Yes.
Yes. All right. Let's do this then. So good afternoon. Happy Friday. I'm Kara Toronto, TAO's Chief Operating Officer, and I have the privilege of moderating our final program for Impact, which is our Impact Economic Competitiveness conversation, which is a Q&A with regional economic development partners. And I'm really excited about this. This is my aside off script, because we've seen a whole different level of engagement statewide during the pandemic. So for all the challenges, like there's been an opportunity to really truly engage more folks from around the entire state. So I'm pumped to hear what each of our economic development partners has to say about their part of the state economic competitiveness and that tie into tech. So I'm joined by Riley O'Brien, Vice President of Events and Experiences at TAO. Should you have any questions or issues during the webinar, feel free to send me a private note or shoot one to the TAO admin. A couple of rules of engagement. We've muted everybody. I think we maybe have turned off video, but if you want to ask a question or respond to a question, you can put it in the chat publicly or privately. We'll monitor that and respond during the discussion. We're a pretty small group, so if you want to ask something or be a part of the conversation, you can engage via the participant icon on your screen. You might have noticed this is being recorded, so just remember that if you are supposed to be doing something else and you don't want to be on our YouTube channel. Engage with us on social media during this call and then throughout into infinity. We love sharing what's happening at TAO and to get participant takeaways from our events. So we've got limited time on this Friday afternoon. So if there are any questions that we don't get to, we'll make sure they get answered later in our online member engagement platform, which is Mobilize. It's our member-only virtual community. We ask our guests when we run out of time to provide written answers and put them into that platform. And if you have any questions about Mobilize or joining TAO, just reach out to membership@techoregon.org. A huge thank you to JLL and Facebook for underwriting this series. And that's not just today, that's for the year. So we appreciate your support and sponsorship. And now I am excited to get to introduce 4 people that I get to work with all the time and that I like. It's fun to see friends. I wish we were in person. So first is Eric Anderson, president of SEDCOR, I've had the opportunity, I think, of being on like 4 presentations with Eric this week. We're happy to have you here. Jennifer Baker, president of Columbia River Economic Development Council, or as we fondly say, CRED-C. Tori Campbell, director of economic development at Prosper Portland. And Roger Lee, president of EDCO, which Roger, oh, there it is, it's spelled out for me, the Economic Development for Central Oregon. So we really do have representation from a big part of the state. I'm gonna pause and let everybody maybe say a couple words about their organization, and I'll start with you, Eric, and then we'll hop into questions.
Sure, thank you, Kara. Yeah, I'm Eric Anderson with SEDCOR. Our official name, according to the IRS, as I've learned recently, is the Strategic Economic Development Corporation of the Mid-Willamette Valley, Oregon. And commas count when you're trying to apply for federal funding, I've also learned. So we're a 3-county economic development organization, public-private partnership. We cover Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties. And kind of traditionally, I think with like a lot of organizations, the 3-legged stool of economic development of recruitment, which gets most of the attention, business retention expansion, which is actually most of the work and most of the success. And most recently, we've gotten more involved with entrepreneurism. I see Laura's on the call here with Oregon Entrepreneurs Network. We've got our venture catalysts that we've been kind of engaging in some interesting ways. You know, we're a little bit behind the state and other regions in doing that. And I'd also say that we're probably more of a stool, rather than a stool, more of a chair or a table these days, because I think the 4th leg around community development is something that we're spending a fair bit of time on as a team, both from the perspective of working with communities as they look at strategic planning. Kara knows the City of Independence well, and we get a lot of our communities that, you know, when we start to talk about what Independence is doing, they kind of roll their eyes and, you know, say, well, yeah, they're doing all this great stuff. And it's like, well, it's a 30-year process, to make them an overnight success. So, we recognize that for particularly some of the smaller rural communities, having a vision, being able to bring partners like Main Street and other organizations to the table is really important. So we tend to convene those sorts of discussions and try to connect that back to economic development. So there's 6 of us here that work out of Salem, and we've been spending an awful lot of time with Skip and Kara lately too. So we're thankful for that.
We enjoy that partnership a lot. Eric, thank you so much. This is actually conveniently the first question, which was, what's your organization's role in economic development? So I just phrased it wrong. I'm really good at scripts. Jennifer.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having CREDC at the table today. I'm Jennifer Baker, president of Columbia, the world's longest economic development council name, Columbia River Economic Development Council. And like Eric's group, we're a public-private nonprofit organization. We cover all of Clark County, which is just north of Multnomah County in the greater Portland region. So CREDC is the steward for the Clark County Comprehensive Economic Development Plan, and that ladders up into the greater Portland Economic Development District. We have a very comprehensive approach to economic development. We look at 3 key pillars. One is business recruitment and retention. Certainly throughout 2020, we were called to task on a lot of retention activity to support companies through COVID-19. Our recruitment pipeline is very strong right now. So there are a ton of companies from outside of the region, outside of the greater Portland region and outside of Oregon and Washington, who are interested in investing in the Pacific Northwest. So we work to cultivate those relationships. And then likewise, we know that to draw and keep companies here, we really need to work to support people and the workforce pipeline. So that and placemaking strategy are what keep us busy in the day-to-day.
Thank you so much. We're going to definitely get into some of those topics later on. Next, Tori Campbell.
Yeah, good to be here, Kara. It's good to see familiar faces and also new colleagues and practitioners in the work. My name is Tori Campbell, and I'm the Director of Economic Development at Prosper Portland. Given the name Prosper Portland, our focus is within the Portland metropolitan area, so the Multnomah County. And our work really centers on many of the things that have already been expressed by other panelists. I would say most notably kind of the 4 areas that all of our programming kind of sits on in terms of the kinds of continuum of services that we want to provide, from your micro startup all the way up to your traded sector businesses, are the 4 elements that every business needs, no matter where they are in their life cycle. So that's going to be increased access to business know-how. And that can be from everything from the startup needing to understand how to build a strong P&L, all the way up to larger companies really wrestling with culture change and how to be more competitive by understanding really the health of their culture for more inclusive types of practices that will strengthen both their ability to recruit and retain diverse talent. Not only with just increasing business know-how, it's also helping businesses access to new markets. So a lot of our work then is centered on within the traded sector in particular, helping businesses figure out how to scale nationally and international, but also we'd also say, because thinking about the continuum of services for businesses, no matter where they are in their life cycle, that also means helping that small micro biz figure out how to translate getting out of a food cart, getting a product on the shelf, and figuring out how to scale. So again, a lot of those services are finding their ways through those different avenues. Access to capital, and every business needs capital, meaningful capital along the way. For us, that also plays out within particularly traded sectors, such as clean tech, where we have a wonderful partnership providing venture capital connections within clean tech. So it's also thinking strategically around what are the various needs within the various traded sectors that we work in, as well as just helping small businesses in the city kind of agnostic of what their industry is, knowing that our city really, the engine of our city is fueled by small businesses throughout. And then lastly, as been mentioned, we do play in the world of supporting workforce development, again, wanting to find and nurture local talent to really fill these positions within traded sector companies is an important piece to the work. And that also centers around community development. So a variety of things that we'll jump into, but happy to be on the call. The last thing I'll say, I think for us, what stands out to be the places where we're learning and also emerging with some really healthy practices is centering all of these things that are universal principles for business growth and vitality, but doing it with the lens of equity. So recognizing that when you put on the lens of race, many of the things that I've discussed maybe had appeared like gaps, but when you put on race, the context you show huge chasms and gaps with respects to how do we help business leaders and innovators who, apart from work ethic and merit, are still finding struggles because of systems that have really excluded them from being able to chase their dreams. And so as a city, we recognize that it's not only a moral imperative that we address that, but it also is going to help us just being competitive to really activate in all of our business leaders and innovators across the full of the city. So happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Tori, and I appreciate you bringing up that last part about equity, because we view that as part of our strategic initiatives as well, and something that can make us more economically competitive as a region. So last, Roger, maybe the only person that saw sun today.
Oh, we see sun every day, right? In Central Oregon? Yeah. At least that's the line we tell our clients. They're looking to move here. So always an honor to be invited to talk at these things. So thanks so much, whole team at Tau. As you saw, I work for an organization that covers a multiple county area, tri-county area of Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson. And I'll keep it short that we help companies move, start, or grow here. And then we, outside of really job creation and investment in the traded sector, we get involved with run an internship program on that in that same kind of territory, with 3 different coordinators doing that out of and have 5 offices. And then we also do things around maybe a Port of Portland does, say in the Portland area, around air service recruitment. So we help attract and retain commercial air service, among other things. We are not an economic development district, so we don't do those types of activities. We don't have loan funds, et cetera, but we certainly help companies raise capital, whether it's through standard financing or investors. So that's probably enough.
Thanks, Roger. I appreciate it. I appreciate all y'all being here on a Friday. So I'm actually going to start these questions, and we don't have a lot of specific questions. So we really view you all as experts from around the region to hop in and answer as you see fit. But I'm going to start this one with Jennifer, because she mentioned having a robust pipeline heading up into Southwest Washington. So how is your region specifically working to be more competitive today, but also in the future?
Well, I think it can really be broken down into 2 categories of development activity, and that is land and people. So in 2019, we did a refresh of the employment land study footprint across Clark County, and saw that a number of our industrial employment lands are in a category that is not build ready at the moment. And so what we hear from companies right now is if they're looking to move, they don't want to wait a year for the infrastructure to come in place. They want to be able to move into something that's already fits their perfect specifications or can be market ready in a heartbeat. And so, so one of the ways that we're helping shape the dialogue is through public infrastructure commentary on, what would be necessary to facilitate further development in the land footprint that would then invite a broader company presence. And so that's been an interesting and rewarding part of our work. I think things like the Vancouver waterfront and the 20-year vision for seeing that recognized is something that people are curious about. So now if you cross over the I-5 bridge, you see the Grand Pier, you see aspects of development in our Clark County architecture that people may have driven by 10 years ago and seen the mill property, and it was less intriguing. So, so there's a land and development aspect. Things like Hewlett Packard's investment in an area we call Section 30 will work to unleash about 500 acres of industrial employment land, and we're excited that we have the capacity to be facilitating growth in our industrial land footprint. I think something that has certainly impacted the viewpoint and how we use land is COVID, and there's a lot of curiosity about Class A office space how companies will integrate back into that space and to what extent. And so a lot of movement across the greater Portland region and considerations for how we best use the existing space. So that's an important component of the dialogue. And then the other aspect of our work for competitiveness is really once we can demonstrate that there is land or a building that is attractive to a company from outside the region, how do we assure them that there is the right workforce skills base? And the greater Portland region has such a tremendous skills base in the computer and electronics industry through Silicon Forest. So being able to reinforce that industry cluster is something we work towards. Likewise with life sciences and software space, you have the Oregon Bio Incubator that is just bursting at the seams with companies that are doing smart and innovative things. So how do we help advance opportunity for those companies to break out on their own and to mitigate the aversion to risk tolerance that sometimes comes along with spurring that innovative investment. I'd like to tag on lastly to something that Tori shared, which is that we want to be representing our community and have representation of a broad swath of our community in different leadership positions. So more now than ever, when companies from outside the region ask us, what is a city's plan for realizing inclusive community? What is the city's engagement plan? We need to be ready with those responses and have been working to that end to try to create our most inclusive workforce and leadership environment.
Awesome. Tori, Eric, Roger, any of y'all want to tack on any thoughts?
Sure, I'll be happy to jump in. Such a great question around what are we doing regionally for increasing our competitiveness. We really stand at this unique place of where kind of the life cycle of our CEDS, kind of our comprehensive economic development strategy, is something that we've been already leaning into regionally. And then compounding that is with the pandemic. And so I think it has actually brought a lot of the partners together to not just talk about the traditional modes and modalities of supporting economic development from a regional standpoint, but also having to slow down and saying, how do we also thoughtfully navigate the recovery that we're all are kind of wrestling through and trying to understand? And a lot of that is dictated by our ability to understand the virus and get back to that level of freedom and walkability and just being back out in community. What has been, I think, been really interesting in this is we've all had a fresh understanding of the real value of coordination. Like there's a different kind of coordination that you need. There's the kind of I would call it like the pseudo level of coordination, which is you know everyone, you say hello, but when it comes to really walking together in a level of depth that really can move systems and reimagine things, we oftentimes are not finding ourselves there. This season has really demanded a different kind of cooperation from everyone. And I think it's also helped to move us to a place where we are rethinking the regionality of our work in such a way that how can we grow and learn from one another? How can we reimagine our work together? How can companies and businesses who oftentimes look at our region in that way, but we ourselves from a partnership standpoint are strong. And so I've been really encouraged by the conversations. It has meant there's three themes that really we've also wrestled with as kind of our North Star, if you will, which is kind of growth, which we'd all assume growth is an important piece of it, but also strategies around sustainability, which is incredibly important. That's both going to help us the long run. But I think the other piece too, and it's already been noted, is the importance of equity, and really thinking of how do we link those three together to make a cord that's not easily broken, if I can use that proverb. And so I think that's something that is incredibly important for us to continue to lean into. That has meant the evaluation of a lot of our traded sector industries and understanding which ones still are our lead trains and which ones are emerging that actually maybe have new attention that should be devoted to them. As an example, how do we think about building a more resilient and equitable food system? How do we take advantage of with what the impacts of potential climate change? How does that show our region as being a more conducive place for companies to come for a variety of sources, both the natural assets that we have as well as the individuals moving to the region. So quite a bit there in terms of this competitiveness. I think the main thing I hope you hear in all of this is the real importance of a more radical kind of coordination and collaboration in order to grow our scale and our reach to support the region and to retain really strong assets in the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. I was going to ask you next, since you're in a little bit a different part of the state.
And Tori said food systems, and I was like, ears perked up a little bit. You know, I think a lot of economic development organizations, you know, probably internationally, but nationally, you know, hire consultants, they do a strategic plan for you, come back, and guess what? You're all targeting the same 5 or 6 industries, you know, and one of the things that, like most epiphanies, I had one when I came down here that involves beer, but it was, you know, going through a tour of the Crosby Hop Farm and seeing, you know, first of all, it was during harvest. So, you know, first I was just trying to imagine folks in the Midwest with a Budweiser on a couch, you know, and trying to tell them that there's, you know, that's an ag product, that's, you know, salad in a can. But also just watching the fact that Crosby uses equipment that's made here for harvesting. It's made in Marion County, a company called DK Fab, DK Fab. I know that they have 3,000 accounts around the world. So there's people making, you know, beer with Willamette hops and other locally grown hops. We know that there's transportation, logistics, you know, cold storage, creative, and then you just got the food processors and the beer makers. And all of a sudden it just sort of dawned on me that, you know, really we don't play up the ag card enough here in our region. And I would even suggest that maybe Salem has been a little slow to actually kind of staking its claim on, you know, hey, we're part of the Willamette Valley too. You know, we're the heart of the Willamette Valley. We grow 170 crops in these 3 counties. So how do we really take advantage of what is the heart of, you know, if you visualize the Venn diagram of our economy, there's a bunch of different industries that have one intersection around what we grow here. So that includes technology and that includes creative. So we've really kind of concentrated a bit on that to make us a little more competitive. I think that's where we really have a competitive advantage. And as a result of that, I think just reaching out to the next generation of business owners to identify how we can help them with adapting new technologies, being innovative, coming up with new solutions to their problems, identifying supply chain opportunities here, you know, really trying to build on that industry. I mean, we've got, you know, the Mill Creek Corporate Center from a land perspective that's, you know, been in development for many years. It's almost full now. And it's, you know, there's a lot of, you know, transportation, distribution, warehouse types of facilities there. You know, we want to see local products being stored and sent out from those, you know, from those on those trucks that come through here. So that's been really, I think, one of the more fun parts for us, because locals really appreciate the fact that we're kind of looking at our traditional industries here, but we're looking at it through a different lens of you know, hey, this is a special thing that, you know, Willamette, you know, I go back to visit family in Sweden. People know how to pronounce Willamette in Oregon and Sweden. They don't know how to do that in most of the parts of the country here. So how do we as SEDCOR take advantage of the fact that we have a, you know, world-class Pinot Noir, world-class wine industry, and really build that up to kind of raise the waterline for all the boats we have here, all the different kinds of industries. And as this came, you know, as this epiphany came to pass, you know, we also had COVID come along. So, you know, you actually start to think in terms of food systems and food security, and how do we eat more of what we grow here? How do we get more of what we grow on the school lunches here? How do we get more in people's homes as they open up their box and prepare dinner? You know, so I think it's a far-reaching opportunity for us, and it's not to say that we're not inclusive of other types of businesses and industries, but it's surprising how many do have a connection to agriculture here. So and we're passionate about it and excited about it, and it tastes pretty good too. And most of you will be enjoying one of our ag products, presumably from Oregon, in the probably next hour or so. So, or Washington. Sorry, Jen.
No, that's great. And I'm going to ask Roger the same question, and then I have a specific question for him. But one of my favorite stories out of the pandemic was actually from the Wooden Shoe Tulip Farm, when they went through their own digital transformation right at the very beginning of COVID to sell all those tulips in the fields. And I don't know if y'all saw this, it made the New York Times, because you could order tulips that could be sent to folks that were in lockdown in senior care facilities and to first responders. And so it was a really interesting way for them to generate revenue. And they got national recognition for it. So it's pretty cool.
Well, and Kara, you show the scrappy nature of our farmers, because the same farm is probably our star CDB oil production business in Oregon also, and Global Gap certified, the first one in the U.S. to be Global Gap certified. So now, though they're smart people that grow those tulips.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Roger, you're in Central Oregon, and you mentioned in your opening that you're not part of the SEDS. So like, how are you being competitive now and for the future over there in Bend?
Yeah, so I would say identify with a lot of the comments that have already been made. But one of the things that we realize, and I think Oregon really fits this description as well, is that we're pretty undercapitalized as a state. And so we've focused some efforts on early stage capital. There's plenty of debt capital, it seems like, out there right now. Maybe just a lack of folks to lend it to that qualify. But for our early stage companies, it's just not so much of an option. So we've had a focused effort on trying to build that more of a base here. So we have a couple of funds, Seven Peaks Ventures, early stage tech, primarily a tech venture fund that is now based here, invests across the Northwest, actually probably West Coast even, but is based in Bend. And then also Cascade Seed Fund, which we help get started, find a fund manager that continues that today, Julie Harrelson. So that's a couple of pieces of that, but we're also looking to hopefully take the Bend Venture Conference, which will be in its 16th year, I think this year, 16th or 17th year, to really double the amount of investors we have involved with that. So it just provides more capital, and more often than not recently, it hasn't been, Central Oregon companies that have won that. They've been out of Portland, Vancouver, Seattle, et cetera. So we try to make our competitions here not with like a home person kind of, you don't get extra points for being in Central Oregon on that front. So and maybe to address some of the work that Jen is doing up there in Clark County. So just around the stat that I've always known and kind of lived, and I know other folks have as well, is that 85% of the communities are offering bare land, and 85% of the companies want a constructed building. And so we've been trying to add to that built environment here. We've had vacancy rates, in our communities. Ben and Redmond have been in the less than 1% to 2.5% range for industrial, and not much too much higher for office. Office is certainly changing. And so we've had a focused effort and been able to bring in a million square feet in new, primarily spec space. Some of that's owner occupied as well, but that's pretty decent size for an area like ours, which represents about 5% of the population of the state, and is driving about twice that amount for growth and so forth. So those are a few things that we're focused on in competitiveness. I will say that we spend as much time as we're able as a business development organization trying to convince policymakers at the state level not to completely yank the rug out from underneath us from a business climate perspective. And that seems to be more and more a full-time job, at least for the first 2 quarters of the legislative session. So I'll leave it at that.
We may come back to that. We actually have a question specifically to you about a comment that you just made from Ashley Henry at BBPDX. Can you say more about the lack of companies to lend capital to?
Yeah, I think, there's just obviously been a huge amount of capital flow through banks and credit unions as kind of the traditional places to get debt capital, with whether it's PPP or the emergency funds directly from the from the SBA. There's SBA programs have been lending like in record numbers as well. I think what they find is that the deals that the banks are saying, kind of feel like we've done most of the deals we can possibly do, and what's left aren't meeting, kind of the criteria for primarily repayment. I mean, that's one of the big things that banks look at, and some of it's around risk and so forth. So yeah, I hear more. Well, I was just reading here recently, not that situation here in the US or probably in Oregon, but if you have money in Europe, particularly Germany, you'll get to pay for that being in the bank. So there's just like this flood of cash that I think is out there, and the business community, and at least in our region, has been able to access a good chunk of that. So we get very few calls from businesses saying, gosh, I could do this only if I had the money.
Thanks, Roger. Ashley, I hope that answered your question. So I want to start with Tori on this one, and I don't know that we need everyone to answer because I want to get through some more of the questions that I have, but you've talked a lot about centering on equity, and we all know that that's really important, and we love that. What exactly are you doing specifically to create that inclusive economic growth?
I'll try to be succinct, maybe just highlight a couple of efforts that I think will show you some of the breadth of the work, because it really spans the whole of all of our programs and initiatives, in terms of both embedding it in, building it in, and also retooling our programs so that it calls it out. So as an example, I think I shared before, we currently have a network of over 20 partners, which we call our Inclusive Business Resource Network. And we invest several $1 million annually to work with those partners, who in turn are able to go out and to deliver the necessary small business technical assistance to small businesses throughout our city, with the focus on reaching Black and Indigenous and other people of color, small business owners, as well as women. And so as an example, that network, which really speaks to the importance of working through partnerships to be that multiplier of exponential impact and reach, because we can't do it on our own. They've been able to help over the last year or so. As an example, over 1,000 businesses receive technical assistance. And that could be around legal services, business basics, all those things that a business needs to grow their capacity to reimagine their product and services and to scale. So that's a great example where, again, working with those partners, many of them are culturally specific organizations or have an acute ability and awareness of how to provide culturally responsive supports and services, realizing that business terms and concepts are pretty universal, but the way we deliver them, how we understand the communities that we're engaging, will help us be that much more effectual in how those services come across. So that's just one program that we've been doing that for the last 10 years, and it's continued to grow. And it's, again, seeding some of those early small businesses, particularly in communities that historically have been marginalized, that if we can get them to grow and scale, the hope is that they will eventually kind of matriculate, if you will, through just their business life cycle to a place where many of them are employing more individuals coming out of those respective communities. That's one example. I would say another one that is going to be on the traded sector side, kind of thinking just continuing, and it has a lot to do with, and I've shared a little bit earlier, businesses more and more within traded sector spaces, they all need business support, but one of the areas we are finding that many companies are craving is the understanding of how to build a stronger and more inclusive work environment, whether that be manufacturing, where we know there's a lot of great jobs. In many instances, you don't need any more than a high school education, but is the environment there sustainable enough so the person doesn't just have to grit and bear in order to from a kind of a cultural standpoint, in order to make a living, all the way to our tech spaces, which historically have been, predominantly male and white. And so how do we ensure, again, thinking of the diversity of talent, there's so many studies that have shown that the strength and competitiveness of a business is really rooted in its diversity, because oftentimes the markets that they're reaching into, they should have that same representation within their company. But a lot of CEOs are realizing, I don't have the tools to create that kind of environment that not only draws in that rich, diverse talent, helps them to grow and scale and promote, of which helps us remain competitive. So we have programs designed just really towards helping that. To an example, our Portland Means Progress, which is, you can actually find it, it's a website, literally just type in Portland Means Progress. And there's 3 goals in there that really helps businesses, which is around procurement. So helping companies who really want to have that impact of procuring locally with BIPOC business owners. But we also have a component around internships and creating those meaningful experiences. And I know we'll touch on that a little bit down the road around education. But the other piece to it is around that cultural roadmap. So we've really created a cultural roadmap that's not prescriptive, but it lays out here the kind of the ingredients that one would need to have within their company to create that kind of dynamic and healthy, more inclusive environment. And then we provide them tools. We have cohorts, relationships, workshops. And so in a very practical way, it's not money that they're asking for necessarily. You know, it's not necessarily new industrial land that they're looking for, although some companies are, but it really comes to the human to human and interpersonal skills that are needed. And I think we find that the companies that are getting it right and that are improving are finding themselves not only bringing in the strongest amount of talent, but also, again, their product and services are reaching those new markets. So I think those are just, you know, some of the examples where we're seeing how we're helping with inclusion, both from literally just giving them the know-hows of business know-how to culture change. I also mentioned, like, within our clean tech space, we have Eco Capital, venture capital program that's designed, again, to make those linkages. VCs looking to support kind of upstart companies within the clean space. And again, within those kind of matchmaking relationships, we prioritize making sure that we're centering BIPOC and women, you know, founders in those spaces and providing that support. So a lot of it for us is using many of the same tools that all of us have at our disposal, but recognizing, if we want to use the kind of the analogy of watering the grass, is making sure that we're watering the full lawn as opposed to just one area. And once you water it, you find that the grass grows in the same way. And so for us, continuing to see increasing, you know, positive strides when companies are being that intentional around inclusion. Not perfect, it's a struggle at times, but it definitely is proving to be well worth it.
I appreciate that. We've had the opportunity to work with you on some of those initiatives from a tech standpoint, so really appreciate that. And I'm gonna take that clean tech comment that you made, and I'm gonna actually ask Eric for his opinion on this, because we know that the Pacific Northwest is known nationally and globally for clean tech, environmental innovation, and I think some of what we're working on with the SEDCOR team at TAO is ag innovation. How do we capitalize on this track record alongside renewed federal and global interest in combating climate change? Because there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, you know, it's you know, when you start talking about carbon, you know, people start to run for the hills a lot of the time in a good number of parts of the state. One of the things that you saw during our most recent design sprint here around ag innovation, there was a discussion about carbon, you know, sequestration. And, you know, as those topics unfold on a kind of national and state level, one of the things that you know, we keep naively saying here is we grow a lot of stuff in this valley, you know, and, you know, I keep kind of going back to the early days of you know, wind generation and renewable energy, when there was a bunch of, you know, initiatives and incentives for wind power. And we started to see the first folks that were coming in to sort of take advantage of these were being, you know, shuttled up from San Francisco Bay Area and talking with farmers out in Sherman and Gillum counties and trying to you know, plan for you know, wind farms out there. And after a while, the community said, how do we get a piece of this? How do we plan so that we have our own infrastructure in place that we can, whether it's diversification of farmer income or whatever else, how do we take advantage of this so it's not an outsider, you know, the people that get kind of paid to see those opportunities. And I kind of feel we're in the same boat with carbon right now, is that if we don't come up with some really unique ways to be inclusive of you know, the farmers and what we grow in this area and around the state, someone else is going to come up and figure out how to monetize that to their own benefit. So it's one thing that we're really looking at. I'm hoping that that's one of the topics that through our ag innovation design sprints and our challenge in that we have some people tackle that one for us and give us some ideas of how we can grow, you know, grow some business opportunities out of that. One of the things that, you know, as a result of this kind of concentration on ag, I mentioned it a little bit, and we've been talking about it, is, you know, we got some federal funding for the next couple of years to do a Northwest Ag Innovation Hub. And it really is working with farmers to identify and growers to identify what their issues are and how we can identify technology solutions to solve them. And we want to encourage, it's not just about growing, it's not just about production, but it is about climate. It's about understanding climate. It's about microclimates. We had a fantastic presentation the other night, Wednesday night. It could have been a long time ago or just today. I'm confused. But I really, we have an industry here that depends on microclimate data, to look at how different terroir affects not just grapes, but also potentially hops in the future and other products here. That kind of data and those kinds of businesses that come up and spring out of that is a real opportunity for us to diversify into more environmental sciences and engage our education partners too at the same time. So I think we're, once again, trying to figure out how we play in that space, but do it in a way that seems consistent to what we are as a region and where our real opportunities are.
I love that. And I've actually got a question from the chat that's open to anybody. So what are your thoughts on the role of export and international trade for businesses in your respective regions? And how is your organization maximizing resources available to companies looking to export? I love that question because we know that Oregon has always been an exporter. I see a lot of nodding and no one unmuting.
Well, I know for us, it's, it's having those resources to help. I mean, as we are an export region. A lot of what we grow gets shipped out through ports, and it is key for us. But one of the things I keep harping on the beverage industry, but Oregon Fruit Products business here in town that you just got to meet Chris Sarles, their president of their company. They have a deal with McKellar, the Danish brewery, where they have co-branded beer that has Oregon fruit, in it, 5 or 6 different varieties. And, those are the kinds of stories we need to keep telling, businesses here, because we do have, businesses that are very active exporters, but there's also a lot of small businesses that don't understand, how they actually enter into that business, how they get into export markets. So we really depend on our federal and state partners, Business Oregon, the International Division, the Small Business Development Center Network, that kind of expertise to really get the word out to folks.
Awesome. Anybody else want to take a stab at that? Because I got more questions over here. All right, I'm gonna go to Roger. Roger, this is the one specific question that you can thank Skip for. So the Milken best.
Getting nervous.
Don't get nervous. You got this. It could apply to anybody, but we're going with you. So I think we all saw Milken's best performing cities report last week, with Bend dropping from #1 for the past 4 years in a row to number 13 in 2020. And we can, Skip says we already chatted about this online earlier this week. Roger, were you part of that conversation?
Indeed.
So Ben hasn't seen a huge expansion in remote work, especially tech workers, but that doesn't translate into local tech GDP and job growth. So, that's part of the rationale behind that drop. So how does Central Oregon capitalize on all this talent so it can translate into local growth for local companies?
It's a great question. I think it is translating into growth for local tech companies. You see a number of people that will say, hey, if I can live anywhere, I'll live here and work wherever my parent company is. And then they're like, yeah, but then it kind of loses its luster and you get sick of seeing the 4 walls like we all have during COVID. And then like, gosh, it'd be really nice to have a local team to work for. We've hired some of those people in our organization over the years. We hired a guy from Tesla, for example, and he took a huge pay cut to come work for us. But he's like, I'm so sick of being on planes and doing everything remotely. So I think it's just, attracting that talent, particularly if you have some critical mass in local companies. I think that's one of the things that Central Oregon had lacked over the years. But in the last decade, we have like 130 tech companies here. We have 1,000 kind of traded sector companies. that folks they're just not stuck with one company or two options in town. And so I think that you'll see that bore out. But the Milken Institute, I mean, we've got to know those folks really well over the years. And the Milken Institute is changing, like businesses change, like, life changes. And some of the principal architects of that have left the organization. They're now in the Midwest, or they're down the Southeast. So the new folks are taking on, and they're kind of putting their stamp on it, which includes things like housing, which I think will continue to hurt Oregon's rankings, housing costs, housing affordability. But the GDP was a mystery to us. I think it's a glitch in the numbers, quite frankly. I don't know how you go from 10th in the nation, which Ben was last year, to 156th in 12 months. So we've had crushing employment losses in the tourism industry, but not in tech. So that one's a head scratcher. I'm going to contact the folks. I can't even find out where they get the data, quite frankly. I've looked for it. So I can get county GDP data, but county GDP data for tech only. Maybe Tao and the team there can figure this out more than I can.
I think that may be my favorite answer of the day. I'm not even sure where they get the data. I will say, you mentioned Tesla. It never ceases to amaze me, the companies that have employees working out of Bend. We learned earlier this week that, there's a few folks that work for SpaceX that live in Bend. And I mean, that is really cool. They were checking out our website, which made us feel really cool. So thank you for that. Oh, Roger, every time you talk, Ashley has a question for you. She says, given the impact of housing affordability, Roger, is your industry engaging to support policies that would address that challenge? So as EDCO, are you talking to legislators and folks about the housing affordability challenges?
Yeah, we are, and it's really this kind of more of a network. The economic development folks around the table. We have a lobbyist through Tompkins Corp there in Portland that helps advocate for those things. But yeah, it's complicated. We have a land use system that I think most Oregonians love, and yet for any kind of growth communities, and I think it's certainly a big challenge for the metro area. It's not necessarily serving our economy or our local residents super well, with the objectives that are placed there. We used to have a guy that worked for us, came from us by way of Texas. And he said, the only things that Americans hate worse than sprawl is density. So, that's the dilemma I think we have in Oregon is, how do you keep this sense of place, this kind of quality of life that Oregon's known for, and have more people over time, and a larger economy, et cetera. So it's a challenge, and I think we are continually trying to remind our legislators that there's many instances where our land use system works, and there's lots of instances where it doesn't. And housing is one of those that's popping its head up, I think, quite obviously right now, and the fact that I don't know how you build affordable housing in a place like Bend, which is pretty isolated. You go on Mount Bachelor and you look down, you're like, where's the town? Because there's so much open area. 75% of our land mass is owned by the federal government, but BLM and Forest Service, and I don't know how you build given that footprint, I don't know how you build affordable if your average lot price, for example, is $250,000, which it is today.
Thanks for that, Roger. All right, we're going to do two more questions. One is open to whoever wants to start. I think this is one that we have to talk about before we finish. Thoughts on post-secondary education as an economic driver. So there's a focus on upskilling and reskilling that we've seen as the economy has become more digitized, particularly in the last 51 weeks, not that I'm counting. What partnerships do you have with your workforce development organizations in your region to address the needs of that part of the workforce?
Well, I'd be happy to jump in with a recent CREDC program that was launched. Over the course of hundreds of business visits that we conduct every year, we were hearing from a lot of employers that even students coming out with different certifications, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, that there was an absence of palpable work experience that students were accruing, and to make them really optimally ready to enter the workforce. And so we partnered and are partnering with Washington State University, Vancouver, and our Workforce Southwest Washington partners to stand up a Future Leaders Project. And what that is a paid internship program whereby undergraduates can gain access to some of the leading companies in our region. They get paid to be a member of the company's team, and the company gains from the perspective of a student that is launching into a career trajectory that may or may not be closely aligned to the student's career path. You know, we strive for alignment, but sometimes there's opportunity that stems even beyond what the student's career trajectory may be at that snapshot in time. And this program specifically is geared towards underrepresented community members of the student population at WSU Vancouver. So the program is really designed not only as an experiential program, but to try to help build the social capital and networking ability of students and companies to try to attract and retain this top talent coming out into the region. So we're pretty excited about that program and how it can seed kind of longer term investment in some of the career trajectory, the digitization of manufacturing, where we have a pretty strong footprint in Clark County. So metals and machinery and computers and electronics are two of our legacy sectors. And so we're trying to figure out how to market and grow stronger ties between emerging students and a workforce that is quite honestly aging out of a lot of those occupations without a strong presence of people to step in behind.
Thanks, Jen. We have time for one more person to answer if they want to share their perspective on post-secondary education and programs that you're doing.
Yeah, I'll just tag along. I think we have similar programs Jen mentioned, and it is such a critical piece is not only working with respects to ensuring that that post-secondary experience really is connected to the kind of jobs that are currently available and also future forward. So thinking around the way that we're thinking about AI and automation, and obviously you have clean tech as a conversation, but how are we centering and making sure that students recognize that there's a linkage between what they're studying and what's available. I think that's incredibly important. I think for us, a lot of our work has been centered then on how can we create those meaningful experiences via internships for companies and helping companies think through what that looks like, knowing that for many students, that exposure helps to either affirm what they're studying and also gives them a fresh understanding of the value of what their education can produce for them. And again, grounding that in terms of most kind of the underrepresented faces that you're seeing in these companies when we think around kind of inclusion and culture change. So we definitely see that as a huge necessary component. It's one piece of many that we want to continue to give energy and focus and attention to.
Thanks, Tori. All right, lightning round, because it is 4:54 on a Friday. And we like to end on an up note. So I want everybody to take 1 minute to share a major or a couple of major success stories from your organization over the last year, because we all have them. And I think it's important that we leave people with on a high note. Not that this conversation has not been very enlightening, and also it's really impressive what all of you are doing for our region. So thank you. But all right, I can call on you one by one, or we can go with the magic unmute. I'm calling. I'm going to start. I'm going to go east to west. I'll start with you, Roger.
Okay. What was the question?
Major success of the year.
That's right. I just already slipped my mind. Must be too late on a Friday afternoon. I would say a major success for us, it was a little bit maybe paradoxical, is that we've been around for 40 years. We had our best year ever in terms of number of projects done. So we did 47 deals in the Tri-County area, and that represents hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of jobs in a time where people found themselves unemployed, and there's some great, and I'll tell you a great story from that. There's a company we recruited out of the Bay Area to set up operations here called Valanzi. They're a UAV company, so very obviously engaged in tech, and they're setting up operations in Prineville out at the airport there for testing, as well as R&D and engineering and so forth in Bend. And one of our leaders here locally in tech headed up the tech center for a number of years, found a situation with health issues and so forth, and without employment, and picked up a job there, and it's just been life-changing for her. So at a time when she really needed the support in a variety of ways, that's just, I think, one example of why we do this work. It's we don't oftentimes get to see that human level, but at the end of the day, I think really the saying is true. A job is the foundation for all kinds of incredible change out there, positive change.
That's a great story. Thank you, Roger. All right, Eric, I'm going to you next.
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is between COVID, wildfires, ice storms that were here, I think is a testament to what I have is a fantastic group of 6 people at SEDCOR that have been doing exemplary work this year. So, I mean, that's the success story for us. But we've wanted to go into entrepreneurism. We launched our first, I know by other folks' standards here, this might be cute, but our little seed fund, that actually angel fund, was $50,000 we raised, and Mike White, our venture catalyst, did a great job of getting businesses and entrepreneurs to compete for that. We were able to fund 3 projects, and we're going back just launched our second round to try to bring in some additional investment. Hopefully we'll get more than that. We got $500,000 from the federal government to work on ag innovation and be able to work with folks like Kara and Skip and the Technology Association, with Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, and then some pretty exciting partners in the Midwest, Tennessee and Iowa, that are doing some really innovative things around providing equity to farmers to participate in new startup solutions to their problems. But I'll give one specific example, though, that I just love is we've been, very, very busy with a wide variety of projects, and but one of the most satisfying ones was a company called Yamasa, which has been in this community for quite a while. It's a soy sauce, Yamasa International. It's a Japanese soy sauce manufacturer, and they have some new leadership there, and they wanted to see if there was more Oregon content they could put in their product. And we introduced them to a local farmer, the Root and Claws, and they said, well, hey, we'll give this a shot, because it's not the kind of wheat that normally is grown around here. They planted a 20-acre test run. OSU did the testing. The protein content was fantastic. So now they've got a contract for 100 acres of red wheat that's going to go into Salem-made soy sauce. That another fermentation industry for us, I guess. But the other kind of cool thing is, we are also going into next year with our 40th anniversary, but Yamasa's kind of original starter for what they use dates back to the 1600s. So that's giving us a little more history than we had before too. So it's been an interesting year, but our partnerships have really blossomed and solidified as well. I think whether it's involving new organizations that bring, building a new table and bringing new people to that table to talk about equity, to talk about entrepreneurship, to talk about all these various things my colleagues have been talking about today. It's I think we feel like we're going into the next year in a real sort of high note, ironically or surprisingly.
I think you just came up with your second slogan that I've heard this week for your 40th anniversary. Join us for fermentation forever, right out of the Midwest.
Yeah.
All right, Tori, what do you guys have from Prosper? Highlights.
I'll try to be brief and amazing. I think the thing that comes to mind, 3 things. One is speed, equity, and partnerships. And so I think for us, that was really what noted the last year, is our ability to move quickly with a really broad and sweeping kind of group coalition of partners, public and private, to help kind of understand what businesses were facing early on in the pandemic and all the way through the last 11 to 12 months. And so that resulted in things like a small business relief fund that had several phases where we're able to get out a total of $17 million to support some of the most vulnerable businesses in our city, which was a little over 1,100 businesses, centering about 90% of them being BIPOC and women. Also moving to reopening phases, all the different things we were all checking off to try to support our small business communities. So for us, that was a storefront window cleans campaign around opening with safety so that business owners could feel confident and also can ensure that consumers felt like businesses were on their game in terms of providing the best and the safest environment. So over 8,000 kind of clings and leaflets were put out and dispersing in multiple languages. All the way to supporting businesses with PPE distribution. Again, focusing with some of our minority-owned chambers, we were able to get out the personal protection equipment to over 693 businesses, helping them in the reopening phase, which at that time, the PPE was like liquid gold for businesses in terms of a lifeline to really remain, open and be able to pivot. And then lastly, just the ongoing work and collaboration around highlighting so much of the great work that's happening with so many organizations in the city who love our small business community. And that rolled up into a website called Shop Small PDX, which again centers on continuing to keep an evergreen message of the value of supporting local businesses within our city. So all of that is again a testament of the collaborations and partnerships with folks, including TAO, and the ability to move quickly, but also keeping equity at the core of all of our actions as opposed to an addendum.
Thank you, Tori, and I appreciate that investment you made in small business. I know that my favorite coffee and bagel shop that I go to every Saturday morning was a recipient, and I know that was helpful. So wonderful story. And now we'll let Jen take us home, even though I think we're all mostly home, but we'll let her wrap us up.
Sure. Well, a quick overview of our 2020 and 2020 start to 2021 highlights. We too are embarking on our 40th anniversary of CREDC, which will happen in June of 2022. So maybe Eric, you and I will have to host a co-40th birthday party for regional economic development organizations. Last year found CREDC also called into the grant implementation mode, supporting companies outside of the traded sector, which has historically been our bread and butter area. And to execute that and execute it well really entailed that we lean into partnerships with Main Street organizations, with some of the cultural chambers and other partners to get the broadest word out and the broadest application pool of grant recipients. And so we were really proud of stretching ourselves, stretching our language abilities, and enlisting support to make sure that we were getting the word out to a broad contingent. We launched a Brain Gain initiative to try to attract and retain top high-wage, high-skilled talent to the region. Launched the Future Leaders program with a strong lens for equity and inclusion across the student population. And we got to amplify some amazing business successes. The Zoom Info IPO at sort of an auspicious time during the COVID experience was certainly something that we were so proud of, that a local company could grow from 6 to over 600 employees with a lot of local talent and upskilling of talent was certainly something to be excited about. Likewise, Enlight and companies like Absci, Synthetic Bio are continuing to grow and innovate. And companies like Slumberkins, which just has this amazing emotional intelligence product that was a recipient of some of the funds that Roger had shared about. And I think a testament to why we need local investment in scalable, innovative companies right here, homegrown within the region. So during a really challenging year, a ton of momentum and a lot to celebrate, not the least of which is our partnerships with so many of the people on the phone and with TAO. So thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for that. And those are great success stories. And I had the opportunity to work with some entrepreneurs and share with them at a Clark College event earlier this year. And it's amazing the entrepreneurial innovation systems that are up there in Clark County. So thank y'all for being here and for spending an extra 5 minutes with us. Really big thank you to, I'm blanking even though it's sitting here right in front of me. Riley's like, just pull out your script, Kara. Like, I wrote on it. Sponsors. Okay, JLL and Facebook. Thank you very much. I'm glad I can provide Tori with some laughter this afternoon. Hope everybody has a really good weekend. And we look forward to seeing everybody again soon, online or, God willing, some point in person. Y'all take care. Have a good night.
Thank you.